Jazz, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what you write about.
Yeah, so I am based in Brisbane, Australia, east coast of Australia, and I'm a best-selling author, book coach, and resilience speaker. And when I share about what I do, essentially I say that I help people bring stories to life, and particularly to break through adversity and find purpose through personal storytelling.
That's awesome. And then do you write about that same resiliency type of topic?
Yeah, I do. I have written 3 books now in a series. It's called Reasons to Live One More Day Every Day. And they're anthology books that basically deal with triumph over trauma and resilience after adversity. So it's a theme that's very close to my heart.
Absolutely. I really resonate with that. I'm a trauma author myself. And so anything in that space, I'm like, yes, this is my type of person. So thinking through your writing journey, especially when you sat down to write that first book, were there any sort of struggles you faced that maybe prevented you from getting started or prevented you from getting to that final draft easily?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first book, I was actually working full time and I was also pregnant with my first child. So that book was, I think the main challenges I had firstly were time, because as I said, I was working full time. So working on the book, I was doing that in my lunch breaks and at nighttime and weekends. And so time was the biggest struggle with getting it done. And secondly, because with that first book, I mean, I've now written 3, but when you're writing a book for the first time, it's hard to, you have all these thoughts come up like, is anyone actually going to care about this book? Is it even worth writing it? Because, is anyone going to care? Is it going to be impactful? And so I had all of those sorts of questions coming up as well.
How did you start to work through some of those?
So with the time factor, what I like to say to people is, even though, it's good to have a process and not to have to spend years or decades doing a book, I think it's also important to understand, particularly for a nonfiction book, and particularly if you're writing about really difficult things, which is what I do in my work, conversations around domestic violence, child abuse, trauma, things like that. I think it's helpful to understand that it's not a race. And so for me, even though I was short on time and I really had to maximize the time that I had, it also helped to remind myself that I can create a more impactful book when I take my time delving into these difficult subjects, as opposed to pushing myself to try and have it done in X amount of time. And then when it came to like the fear around what will people think and is anyone going to actually like this, I just had to remind myself why I was actually doing it and why I was creating this book, which helped me to come back to my purpose, and that this was for me, but it was also to help that one person out there who just needed to feel less alone and feel seen and heard. And so coming back to the purpose behind it helped me to actually continue on and finish the manuscript.
Absolutely. Going back to what you said about the time management piece and really giving yourself the grace and the space to write that full book. There's definitely a movement that I'm seeing in the self-publishing community of like write and publish in 90 days and get it up as quickly as possible. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that and maybe why that's harmful for authors?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because I feel very passionately about it. With my own book coaching clients, I do actually do some 90-day sprints, but I always make sure that I say to them, look, this is just here to help you get as far forward as you can in this space, and you don't have to have it done in this time frame, because when you're memoir writing or writing about difficult subjects, you really need to look after yourself. You need to be able to give yourself you need to be able to self-care and really look after yourself throughout the writing process. And personally, that's why I really don't vibe with the whole write your book in 7 days or write your book in a weekend or 30 days, because I feel that when people do that, firstly, they're speeding through it so quickly that they are not giving themselves time to really dive into the memories and topics that they really need to explore fully in order to really make this book impactful and connect with the reader. And secondly, I just feel like you're just burning yourself out. So I really don't resonate with that whole movement. but I feel like, yeah, it's just about making a commitment and understanding that everyone's writing journey is different. And, you know, I see some people finish their books in 3 months, others 6 months, and some it takes a couple of years. But it's just about finding what's right for you, but also managing your time so you can make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you said all that. I too have very strong feelings about that type of rushed movement. I think that, you know, when you write a really good book, it's about pouring yourself into it. Just like you're talking about your stories, your highs and your lows. And I feel like that can get missed if you're just trying to get it done and get it up as quickly as possible. So we definitely agree with each other on that topic.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm not the only one who thinks that way, because it's everywhere all over social media at the moment.
It is. It's all the Facebook ads. So thinking about, you know, maybe with your own work or the work you've done with clients, when people come to you or you come to yourself and you say, okay, cool, I'm going to write this book. This is what I want to write it about. How do you start to organize those ideas into either an outline or a book structure that makes sense, not only to write, but for readers as well?
Yeah, that's something I really love delving into with my own clients. I have a method that I call the story archive. And that's essentially where, you know, without giving all of it away, if to give a really quick outline, if somebody wants to get their book organized and they just want to find a way to get started without that massive overwhelm that you often get when you start a book, the first thing I'll recommend is that they just make a top 20 list of the most pivotal moments in their life, or the moments that have been real catalysts for their growth and change, difficult moments, just things that most stand out to them in their journey. And then all you need to do is start, you know, sectioning those subheadings. And if you just aim to write, you know, 2,000 to 5,000 words on each of those memories, you'll have a really great book outline that, you know, you've made a start on. And obviously there's a lot more to creating a book outline than that. But if you want to just strip back some of that overwhelm, I just recommend making a top 20 list and just starting with those memories and then begin to fill out the content from there.
Absolutely. I love how that's broken down. You know, it's a lot easier to approach a 2,000 or 5,000 word chapter than it is a 50 or 70,000 word manuscript. So
yeah, exactly.
I love that approach. I love that approach. So most of the people that are going to be watching this video, they are first-time nonfiction authors. They've never written a book before. Most of them are entrepreneurs running their own business. Now they want to add this, you know, into their business. What final tips would you give someone who has said, okay, I want to write a book, but maybe they're struggling to get that final draft done?
Yeah. So there's 3 things I wrote down that I wanted to make sure I touched on. The first one is make sure that from the very beginning, you're clear on who you're actually writing this book for. So going back to the beginning and really creating and defining your target audience from the beginning, because when you know who you're actually writing this book for, number one, it's going to be more impactful. It's obviously going to connect with that reader, but it's easier to continue on and actually finish the manuscript when you have that sort of end defined sort of goal in mind. The other thing I would recommend is don't edit as you go along. A lot of people think that maybe it's a good idea to, you know, polish up their chapters as they go, and that'll save them time later on. But all you're doing is making your book writing journey, you know, 2 or 3 times longer than it needs to be. Because if you're trying to polish everything as you write it, you're either never going to finish the manuscript, or it's going to take you hundreds of hours more than it needs to. And when it comes to maximizing time so that you can actually finish the manuscript, I recommend actually putting put your writing sessions into your calendar. So just like any work appointment or a doctor's appointment, when you see it there, you go, oh, okay, I actually have to sit down and write today. And that will just give you a bit of accountability. Obviously, if you have a book coach or mentor, that is extremely helpful. But if you don't have that, putting something in your calendar can give you a bit of that accountability along the way.
Mm-hmm. Those are great tips. Well, Jazz, thank you so much for all this information. It has been a pleasure talking with you. And I feel like we're kindred souls in a lot of ways when it comes to writing. So thank you for spending some time with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the series.